Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us for another edition of Hold My Drink, where we navigate the news and politics with a chaser of civility. I'm your host, Jen, inviting you to grab your favorite beverage, sit back, and imagine with us how to create a new American identity together. Welcome to Hold My Drink this week. Today, I have got my great friend Mike Yates in the house. Yeah, Mike is the host of the podcast that has just recently been named to School-ish. Used to be the School Sucks podcast. He's a public speaker. He's an educator, but really he's an educator disruptor. And we're going to be talking about that. And he used to be at the Alpha School, and now he is at Teach for America's Reinvention Lab as a director. And I've got to tell you, like, this year, one of the highlights of 2020 is me getting to know this guy. Like, he just, you know, he's making changes in the world. And he's absolutely, Mike, I'm so excited to have you here. You know, my first question for you is, what are you drinking?
Yeah, I'm actually drinking a smoothie inside of my like Yeti cup.
Well, I'm teetotaling it today. I've got coffee, but I have to tell you, I did put creamer in it that tastes like Bailey's.
Oh, hey, like I also have coffee on my desk, but you know, I need that Bailey's creamer.
Oh yeah, it's good, and I've got to tell you, I'm recording today from my family's haunted house in
Oh,
Fredericksburg, Texas.
oh,
Mhm.
peaches. Like there's peaches.
Mhm.
That's cool.
Yep. Yep. So it's haunted. You can see it's like this old brick house, like out in Fredericksburg, Texas. So maybe I'll tell a haunted story in a little bit, but that's not the point of our conversation. I want to hear so much about what you're doing. I want to share what you're doing, but really, my one of my big things that I love. I follow you on social media, and you guys follow Mike Yates. He's got some great ideas on LinkedIn and on his other social media platforms on how to change the way we're educating our kids. But you said something one time that I thought was so profound, and it still sticks with me. You said it's not enough to be anti racist, we've got to be pro Black. And that really stuck with me because that was something, and I told you this at the time, that Mother Teresa one time said, "Don't you'll never find me at an anti-war rally, but you'll always see me at a pro-peace rally." And so I kind of put those two things together, and what you said about being anti-racist versus pro-Black, and to focus on pro-Black. And I really want to know. I know that you are doing this in the education space. What does that look like in education? How do we move away from anti-racism to pro-Black?
Yeah, it's a really uncomfortable conversation for a lot of people. And I think so many people today, like political activism has been reduced to what you don't like. So much so to where you have presidents who are like, you have two presidential candidates who are like, everybody thinks they're so polarizing because everybody's focused on what they're against, right? But but we don't stop and think about like what do I believe in so strongly that I will act on. So the spirit behind that is, I think, like if you apply that to like education, like I literally just tweeted this like right before we got on this call. Like you have to think about everything differently, including like for public schools, your standards. If your standards were written by white people and if they were not written with black students in mind, then to be pro-black, you have to reject those standards. Right at the point in time where your whatever your standards is, whatever your procedures are in school, is making you water down the like actual historical narrative so that you can check some like government box so that you don't get sanctioned or fined, then like what you are doing is anti-black. And so to be pro-black, that means that in all phases of life, um, that you are supporting black people, that you are helping us improve our quality of life, helping us achieve, helping us grow financially.
And so, in education specifically, that's your space. What kind of things do you see? and are you doing specifically to be pro-Black in the education space? What kind of things are you doing specifically, and what kind of things do you think we need to do specifically in the education space?
So what I'm doing specifically is this very very long. It's a long road. It's a long path. I am playing the long game, um, but I have this goal of creating a network of, like, I don't want to call it a district, but I have this goal of creating a network of independent Black-owned schools. And what I think is needed is, I think there needs to be more schools founded by Black people, where there are Black teachers and Black students. And whenever I say this, people are always like, "Well, that sounds like segregation," because, again, like, we have been so conditioned to like jump at multiculturalism, and to jump at integration, and to jump at anti-racism, that we're not really thinking like about being pro-Black. But like, nobody says this when you see, like, for example, there's a phenomenal school in Austin, Texas, where we both live, called Austin Peace Academy. No one says, like, I know this is a Muslim academy, but why aren't you inviting all students to go here? Like, never once did they say you cannot apply here if you're not. But they name themselves as a Muslim academy. When you have Jewish schools, nobody ever says, like, you can't come to school here if you're Jewish, but it's a Jewish school. It's so
Right.
so it's not like I'm not advocating for, like, building walls. I'm advocating for people from my community to build schools with the community that respond to the needs of the community. And if whoever wants to come, but you just need to understand what you're getting. Like,
Right. Well, you posted something the other day, and the statistic was really important. It was talking about Black teachers and
yeah.
the impact that Black teachers have on a Black child's life. Can you remember that statistic and give it to us?
Yeah, I don't want to butcher this one, because I was actually just
It
talking about.
Yeah, it was something insane. Like it changes like
Yeah.
huge dynamic in a child's life.
Yeah, it's basically, there's this like astronomical difference when a Black child has a Black teacher, in terms of like college education,
Yes.
like future career prospects, graduation from high school. And the numbers are staggering. Like, I don't even remember where I put that, but it's a,
They were staggering. I'll drop them in the notes on the little blog that I write for this because it really was, and that to me was being pro-Black. So having the role models where these kids see, okay, going to school, becoming a teacher, getting it invested in your education and having that right there in your classroom, that is being
yeah.
pro-Black. So when I hear you talking about starting schools that have Black administrators and Black teachers, that's kind of what I'm thinking too. I don't know that it has to be all Black. I would love to see just more Black participation in the administration and in the in the teachings. But I was thinking too, here's one thing though, what I was thinking about in terms of being pro-Black, and you tell me what you think about this. So we've got in New York City, there are a lot of schools that are starting to take away the gifted and talented programs. And I know you have a certain feeling about gifted and talented, and we can get into that too. But I think the reason that they're taking away the gifted and talented programs is because they're trying to level the playing field because they're only attracting certain individuals. But I think instead of doing away with these programs, we need to change the way we teach so that all kids realize their gifts. So
Mhm.
maybe we have to change gifted because I know that you're not really into grades, and I think that there's a place for grades. I don't think that it should be you wrote a great piece which I'll also put in the blog on the performance trap. I don't think grades should be the end all be all because we're all individuals and good at different things. But I think that different kids have different gifts no matter their color, and instead of just doing away with the gifted program, have better teachers showing the kids what their gifts are.
Yeah.
And so to me that would be I think it's being anti-racist to do away with gifted programs to try to level the playing field. A better solution to be pro-Black and pro-child in general is to help kids find out what their gifts are. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, yeah. So I think that like there's all these band-aids, like when you say like, oh, the gifted program, if I look at the gifted program in New York, there's like there's no black children in this gifted program. Well, that's because like you're being racist. like like you have bias, like you have this bias against black children. That's what it says. And the toughest thing to do is just to call it what it is. um Speaking of New York, there is a guy named Jeff Wetzler who is the founder of this organization called Transcend, which is phenomenal. And like they will do the work for you. If you don't want to say it to your administration, call Transcend. They'll roll up in your school and be like, "Let me see your graduation requirements. Let me see your gifted program," and they'll tell you like, "Yo, like this is white supremacist," right? Like they will. Um, but it was born out of that realization, right? So Jeff, if you've listened to the Nice White Parents podcast,
I've heard of it. I
yeah,
haven't.
he basically lived that experience. He helped to start a school in New York City, and then looked at the the school board, and was like, "None of our kids go to the school, and that's not right." So he like started this organization to build equity and innovation in the schools, and it's just like absolutely phenomenal and wonderful person. Somebody that you should talk to on here. Um,
Okay.
yeah, I'll connect you. But yeah, I mean, I think that's the spirit. It's like with gifted programs, I agree that yeah, the solution is not necessarily to preserve them or to get rid of them. It's a completely different system, like you talked about. Like it's a
Mhm.
completely different system where you just care about young people, and you engage every young person in a way to where you pull out their gifts and you help them figure out which gifts. Like I have gifts that I don't use, right? If you would have known me in college, people knew me as a spoken word poet. Like that's one of the things that I did all the time. I drove to Austin frequently and competed in poetry slams and all that, but I don't do that so much anymore, right? But I think it's important to figure out like where and when you want to use your gifts for what. And if we change the idea of a gifted and talented program to where it truly is not optional. Everybody is in the gifted and
Yeah.
talented program because all y'all got gifts and you go find out what they are, right? That's
Mhm.
the most anti-racist.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think even beyond being pro-black, that's just pro-child because schools often only teach to certain skills, and it's math,
Mhm.
English, and you've got 10 other skills. I think that kinetic and all these other skills that we're not teaching to. So I think that yeah, just changing the playing field and having those teachers like you were talking about that are models for all children of
Yeah.
showing what their gifts are. But let me hit you with something else though. Uh, Diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I am all about that. I think that it's incredibly important. I don't think that we have been doing it right. I think that we need to change the game, but I don't think we're still doing it right. So I think a lot of what I see in the DEI programs is they are focusing on oppression. They're focusing on a lost history that we need to bring back. We don't do an honest history. We don't go back and do an honest history. But that history, what I'm not seeing in a lot of the DEI classes and the it's a focus on slavery, it's a focus on the oppression, and it's not the focus. They have lost. I think we should remember slavery, but we have lost the narrative of the Black heroes that led the way for so many of it. I mean, we've got so many Black heroes that are so important in our history, and I don't see that. We talk about role models being taught in our schools either. So, what do you think? I mean, are we doing it wrong? What can we be doing differently?
Yeah, I don't know. Like DEI is interesting because it's an industry now, which is really weird. It's uncomfortable in a way because when schools hire a DEI consultant, they're hiring somebody who's making money, like who wants to make money um, from helping you that like achieve equity, and that's not wrong. It's just weird. And the other thing that I notice about it, and I don't have any hard data. Like I can Google this real quick at some point, but from what I see, in my experience, the DEI industry is dominated by white women, um, and so while I love many of them, like for example, I love Robin DiAngelo. Like everybody uses D'Angelo's work, white fragility. And like while white fragility is very, I think it can be very constructive and very helpful, there are like a ton of black writers that like I would rather read.
Right.
And like there's a ton of writers that I think have like maybe a greater depth to add to the conversation. So like I was telling a friend of mine, like if you're reading Robin DiAngelo, not read Michael Eric Dyson, then I don't want to talk to you because Michael Eric Dyson might be the most important black voice on planet Earth right now, to me
Mhm.
anyway. Um, like I mean, obviously, like Ta-Nehisi Coates and Ibrahim Kendi, right? Like there's a lot of them, but like I get into like Reverend Cohn, like if you want to talk about black theology, right? Like if you want to talk about like the he has something called the theology of the oppressed, which is kind of what you talked about. Like it's reorienting your understanding of oppression through the idea of overcoming, right? Like through the idea of heroes, and like what does the church do with like oppression, and stuff like that. So it's very very interesting. But uh, yeah, I think DEI is dominated by white women. Um, as far as its place in schools, the mistake that I see happening a lot is one that we actually made at Alpha, that you're trying to retrofit. Like everybody's creating these like interesting school models, and then they try to retrofit it for diversity. Like they go, oh, like
Mhm.
we've built this awesome school. Like this is gonna happen. Like, it probably happened with Elon Musk's school. There's like all these new projects out there. Some of them I'm not gonna name them, but it's gonna happen with them. They like they create this awesome model and people flock to it, people with money, and then they go, "Oh, there's nobody from a different background. Let's go try to find some." And by the time like the damage is done, the problem's too deep. So I don't know. I I I think it's a mixed bag for me. And it's tough to speak out against DEI because
Yeah.
they'll come for you on Twitter.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, I'll tell you, I'll you probably get it on Twitter, but I'm not a fan of Robin DiAngelo
Right.
at all. And I agree with what you were saying, but I also would add, in addition to some of the authors that you have, you just mentioned Coates and Dyson and whatnot. There's some other authors out there too, and I created a 21-day racial reading guide, racial equity guide, which brought in some other authors, the John McWhorters, the Thomas Sowells, and I think that we should be reading all of those voices in seeing how we can all be working together for to strengthen, not only to be pro-black, but to be again pro-child.
Yeah.
And I think you're right. I want to ask, you just said something that I want to go back to. If you could from the beginning start a school that had diversity baked in, what would you do that hasn't been done?
I mean I think the the foundation of the school, it's the people, right? Like at the end of the day, what a lot of people don't want to recognize is that like if your organization is struggling with diversity, then it's your leadership's fault, right? Like like who's driving the boat, and I've seen quite a few situations right now where you have some staff member that deeply cares about this, like they deeply care about serving, you know, like black and brown children. But the reality is, if your administration, like if the people up top are not committed to this. And when I say
Mhm.
committed, like commitment looks different to everybody, but like truly, I mean, like, are you willing to move the location of your school building? Like, are you willing to change the name? And right, are you willing to change the hours that children go to school? That's what I mean by commitment. But and I think that it's tough because um, it's all. I think it starts with leadership. I would find myself a really like phenomenal, passionate black school leader who who cares about that issue, cares about
Yeah.
educating black people. Like, and I think that's where it starts because so along the lines of the study that I was posting, um, black school leaders are like I think it's like 58% more likely to retain talented black teachers. And it's kind of like the
Mhm.
the everyone's like, oh well, I can't find talented black people, and like false. There's like lots of us. Um, We just don't want to work for you. Um, and so, if you're a leader, you'll get families and you'll get the teachers to
Yeah.
follow.
Yeah. So it sounds like, Mike, then that means you need to start your own school here pretty soon.
I I don't know. I want to. I do want to start my own school, and I am working on some things. But I don't want to be the. I don't want to lead the school because the school leader has to talk to parents, and I don't like doing that. I don't like talking to parents. So like I want to be the person in the shadows that shows up at meetings and goes, "Oh, this is awesome," or like, "What if we did this crazy thing?" And everybody goes, "Yeah, let's do it." That's what I want to do. So, but I am
Well,
working.
yeah, I know, and the reinvention lab has got a lot of great ideas too, I think, out there.
Yeah,
Um, One more thing that, I'm jumping back though, going back to the DEI in schools, and how I feel that the way things are being taught now is focused more on oppression. Although I think that we haven't done a good job of teaching Black history well. I don't think now we're doing a good job of highlighting Black resiliency and Black role models and whatnot. And I was thinking about this last night in my haunted house here. I was thinking, it's so important to remember the past, but not to listen as I'm going to bed and I'm like listening for the ghost. But it not to let it stop you from walking into the right light, right? So don't let this, like, the ghost haunt your future. And that's how I see, that's one of the biggest problems I have with DEIs. I feel that they are not giving our kids the right tools to become the leaders that we need them to be. I feel like it stops at that. I feel like its goal is to teach about a history that needs to be taught about, but they do it in terms where it's all oppression and weakness and leads to a victimization mindset when there is so much strength that can be taught. And we need those kind of people, as you mentioned, as our leaders for our young kids in our schools. Would you agree with that, or am I off base in your mind?
so I think this is tough because I truly believe that there are so few people that are actually well positioned um to teach the full narrative, the full historical narrative of the United States because it's so nuanced.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know that like I would be right for it, and like all I have ever since I was 8 years old, I've only read race theory. So I've read like most
Right.
books about race. I've like formally studied this in college, and I'm just not sure that I'm even at a great place to be able to make this learning happen, right? Like so like if the struggle that we have is that the question always pops up is like when do you start like telling these hard truths and like how do you introduce them, because like the American history curriculum is written like K through 12 to create patriots, which is like it's kind it's insidious. Like the way that they do it is kind of insidious. I mean like but I think what you can do to sort of like to come to a place that I feel is best is you can just create nuance. Like that's the low hanging fruit. Is create nuance with every historical
Yeah.
figure. So like we know that the U.S. history curriculum wants to paint Christopher Columbus as a hero, right? Um, and instead of letting like a fifth grader believe that Columbus is a hero, like you can like a fifth grader, you can straight up say like, look, like Columbus is like pretty much like Thanos, right? Like he thinks he's doing the right thing, but he's actually evil. Like
Right.
and like doesn't know that he really thinks he's doing the right thing. If you can create that and like find those intersection points with things that that age group understands, but by the time a child is 16, but by the time you're talking about like
Mhm.
16 to 18, it's time. Like it's
Mhm.
time for us to say, look, the Texas Revolutionary War was not fought um, over anything short of the right to own slaves, right?
Mhm.
Like,
Mhm.
right. I mean,
Mhm.
blow your mind is if you read firsthand account that like Texan settlers were like pretty much annoyed with Santa Anna. They're like, ah, this guy's annoying until he was like, slavery is abolished, and then they were like,
Yeah.
call the people from Tennessee, somebody get Davy Crockett, and like let's go to like they went to war in Texas to preserve slavery. San Antonio used to be the only city in the United States of America where you could be free and black. And
Wow.
people that we herald as heroes
Uh-huh.
fought to reverse that, right? Like, right, like that. Those are the things, and so if we can figure out how to have those conversations
Mhm.
in school, then I think that this sort of like discussion about like where does DEI fit, I think it'll have a better place. The other thing is there's all these little things that you can do. So, for example, um, like the tokenization of youth. When you talk about inclusion, like most adults are really not willing to be inclusive because inclusion means if you're going to make a decision about the date of the pep rally, it doesn't mean that you huddle up with the coaches and the principal. It means you bring the head football, you bring that quarterback, you bring the guy, the a dude who plays tuba on the band, some kid you can't remember his name, but you know he goes to this. Like you bring in all those students, they make the decision, and you set it up. Period. Like like there's not a they're on the same plane, like that's inclusion, right? Young people just have less years, but that's inclusion. Most
Yeah.
people are not really willing to take that leap, so it's like commitment.
Okay, that is, yeah, mind blown. I mean, absolutely. Inclusion includes bringing the kids it as active participants in their own education.
Right.
Absolutely. I know that that's what you preach, and I know that that's where you're working to change the world. I mean, I'll drop in your TEDx talk and whatnot as well into the blog because that's like where you being in your orbit is so dynamic, Mike, because I and the kids are thriving when they are given that chance. And you see study upon study upon study of how when kids have to teach back, that's when they do some of
Hmm.
their best learning. And so asking their opinion in I mean, it's like it shouldn't be novel, right?
Right. Thing is like all of a sudden innovative. Like so, like my experience in high school was incredible only because I had this incredible teacher named Mr. Martin. And when I look back on him, one of the things that he did was like he was very clear. Like there is a difference between you and I. Like I am your teacher and your coach, but there were these moments where he would sit down and say, "All right, let's work on this." And when I mean like sometimes when I mean this, I mean like a whole class, like a whole curriculum. So like we built this Holocaust studies class, and he was like, no, like you and I are gonna like build the whole class. So I built the class and then I took the class. Like we built the Black Student Alliance, and it was him like going, okay, so what do you want to do? And I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, what do you want to do? Right? Like he gave me the driver's seat. I mean, we raised more money for prom than anybody else because we created business partnerships where we had like Chick-fil-A and Cane's come sell food at our school, and we got a portion of the proceeds because he let us lead in that way. So I think like a lot of there's a lot of like moving pieces to the DEI conversation that like truly in school most people just they're not really about it. Like they're not like that goes beyond right, and
Mhm.
a lot of it, including like for Black people specifically, we have to unlearn some like super damaging and like hella problematic cultural like for example in the South, if you are a Black person, you will never call an adult by their first name ever. Like this, you just don't do it. But if it's better for the learning environment, why not? Right? But it's a cultural thing that we hold on to, and so if we really want to be inclusive, a 15-year-old should be able to look at me and go, Mike, you are late to your own class. What's up? Right? If I believe they have, but it's those challenging things that I think hold this whole thing back.
What I'm hearing from you, what I'm getting the most from this is bottom line is these kids need to be stakeholders in their own education.
Absolutely, 100%.
Yeah, and then yeah, and what I would love to see, I would love to find a way. And I'm almost done with my drink, so I'll end on this, and you tell me what you think. I want to find a way that we can be pro-black, and I love all that you're doing. I want to find a way though And it's going to take some time because we've got a lot of unlearning to do on all sides, but I'd love to find a way where we do that together.
Mm.
And so I know what you said before. You've got your Jewish schools and you've got your Muslim schools, and maybe you have your Black schools that also white people can attend to. But I'd love to get to a place at some point out there where we are all learning and stakeholders in our learning together, and that we see each other and we welcome each other as different races, but as like one kind of big family. And I don't know that we're there yet.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think so. I think it's the nuance in that conversation is that when without heart change, without like real serious heart change, the idea of togetherness is always always muddled up by somebody wanting to be dominant. Which is why when people hear like, oh, create an all black school, they go, wait a minute, are you trying to assert dominance? Like, nah, like just trying to like create a school that where like I can use like certain slang and I can reference certain things and people will get it, right? Like but I think I don't want to go too far down this rabbit trail, but like the initial response to integration in the US was botched because we legislated it without people's hearts changed. And so what you saw in the black community was that in many places we were arguably worse off after integration. But we were together, sort of.
Mhm. Mike, I think you hit the nail on the head with a heart change. And maybe we need to work within our own communities first with a heart change. But I also think we need to rethink what it means to do together. I mean, it'll be messy. That's pretty clear. But I think ultimately we do America better together. And I hope this is the end of the beginning of a very important conversation between us. Thank you so much, Mike, for having a drink with me. Thank you for listening to this episode of Hold My Drink. Like or subscribe to the show and check out the show notes for links to source material and to our website where you can find what each of us is reading every week, different news with different views. If you have a topic that you would like us to explore, drop us a line. And join us next week as we say Hold My Drink and the conversation gets real.